Because we say all the time, even Mr. Murray said today, we're here to discover the good, the true, and the beautiful. We point our children to the good, the true, the beautiful. And so I want to say, what does that mean? What is beauty to you? What is beauty?
I think beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Like it's different for everybody, so that's why it's hard to describe.
Okay, it's individual. So what one person may define as beauty, another person may not. Okay?
I would say where the brokenness comes together.
Where brokenness comes together. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
When we find ourselves broken and we are able to find new life in it.
Together.
Where we're able to see where the broken and the sad leads us to the good.
Right. Okay. So this is more emotional, moral, where you were talking more about aesthetics, right? Okay. So we have like a physical component, and we have a moral component associated with beauty, right? When I looked up a definition in the dictionary, it had two different parts. It said a combination of qualities such as shape, color, or form that pleases the aesthetic senses. Okay, that's what's different. A separate definition was a combination of quality that pleases the intellect or moral senses. So that's part of what makes beauty really complex to define, because some of us fall more here, physical beauty, and some of us falls more here. How would the world around us define beauty? How does our culture define beauty?
We see it in ads and stuff all of the time.
Okay, so tell me what you see. What do you see that our world would say is beautiful?
Youth.
Youth. I agree with that. Youth. What else?
Edginess.
Edginess. Okay. What else?
Like more money, the better. Like
Wealth.
money can buy.
Wealth. Prosperity.
Well, going along with youth, people's looks.
Yeah. Appearance.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Anything else in the world definition or cultural definition of beauty? Okay. Let's see, 2, 4, 6, 7. Okay, so I'd like this table to look up these first two verses. And why don't you grab at the back table 1 Samuel 16:7. And this table, there's Bibles there. I'd like you to grab these two verses. And the back table, see if you can look up these two verses for me. Psalm 50 verse 2, Isaiah 61:3 for the back table. Proverbs 31:30, Ecclesiastes 3:11 here. 1 Samuel 16:7, and here we have 1 Peter 3:3-4, Philippians 4:8. And I'm gonna have kind of share, and we're gonna make a list here a little bit about what God's Word says about beauty. Okay. Do you have 1 Samuel 16:7?
Yep.
Would you read it, please?
But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart."
So based on that, what's something God's Word says that is good or beautiful?
The inward, not the outward.
Inward. Heart. Okay. All right. Who else has one of the verses?
Yeah.
Which one do you have?
1 Peter 3:3-4.
Okay, would you read it, please?
Do not let your adorning be external, the braiding of hair and the putting on of gold jewelry or the clothing you wear, but let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart with the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious.
Okay. So how would you say what is important there?
Again, inward.
Inward. Heart. Okay. Philippians 4:8.
Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things.
Okay. So, what are some things that it says we're to think on? That's inward as well. So we're to think of things that are true, good, just, righteous. It's virtues, right? So not only is our heart important to beauty, but our mind and what we think on is important as well. Okay. Does someone have Ecclesiastes 3:11?
He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's hearts, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end.
Okay. I thought that I loved that verse because where does beauty come from? According to that verse. Would you read the beginning of that again, please?
He has made everything beautiful in its time.
He makes things beautiful. Yeah. In his timing. Yeah. Okay, Proverbs 31:30.
Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised.
Okay, so what is that telling us?
You can't always trust what you see.
Okay, Psalm 50, verse 2.
Out of Zion, the perfection of beauty, God shines forth.
Okay. Profession of beauty, God shines forth. Isaiah 61:3.
To grant those who mourn in Zion, to give them beautiful headdresses instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, the garment of praise instead of a faint spirit, that they may be called oaks of the righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he may be glorified.
What stands out to you there with regard to beauty?
To glorify God in all things.
Glorify God at all times. And as we do, he trades beauty for ashes, sackcloth of mourning for rejoicing. He takes the hard and makes it beautiful. Does that line up with what our culture says beauty is? Would our culture ever say beauty can come from ashes? No, I don't think so. Like it needs to be young and edgy and catchy. So I wanted you to see the difference in definitions. Because beauty has two parts. Beauty has the part that we perceive, we see, whether it's virtues of the heart or whether it is something physical that we find attractive. Beauty has that, we perceive it, but then we also respond to it. And some of these biblical verses were a response, and some were just saying what's in the heart matters, right? So I really wanted you to think about the definition of beauty. I toyed with the idea. Lost Tools of Writing has a way that we can create our own definitions. And if we have time left at the end, we may do that for beauty. Because you think about what it is a group of and other things that are in that group, but what makes beauty different from the rest of the group. Anyway, your own definition. We might do that if we have time. In Romans chapter 1, verses 19 and 20, it says, "For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So they were without excuse." So this is saying, as we see the beauty in God's creation, we need to make a connection between the beauty we see and the creator of that beauty, right? And by just viewing God's beauty that he's created, we see him for who he is. And there's a connection there. And I don't know that we necessarily think about that, but it says man is without excuse of knowing who God is just by the creation he has made. In my mind, that is saying physical beauty has a connection with moral beauty. Physically, we see the creation around us, and we can praise God for that. Even non-believers who see the creation around them, it says they're without excuse. So, thinking about that connection, I pondered this a lot. If I look upon the Grand Canyon, okay, it is beautiful. Mrs. Bean just came back from a vacation at the Grand Canyon. But what do I see about God in the Grand Canyon? It takes it a step further. How can I connect, if I think about the Grand Canyon, how can I connect these two components of beauty?
How mighty it is. And overwhelming.
Yes, overwhelming. The majesty of God, absolutely. What else can we say? How can we connect that with God? That beauty. Vastness.
Everywhere.
It is everywhere. It's huge. His strength. His strength. His transcendence. So these virtues that in my mind are kind of heady become a bit more subjective. It's seeing the image of God all around us. Okay? It's connecting the physical with the moral to translate into this is closer to who God is. Beauty is also beyond the physical. Beauty can be part of our transformation. It's a glimpse of what happens in our own hearts and lives, like kind of what you were saying, in our own hearts and lives, as God takes the broken and transforms it into new life. As God works in our hearts or our children's hearts to transform who he's making them to be, that can be beautiful too. It can be hard, but it can be beautiful, right? And as I began to kind of think about this, like how is this practical, this whole concept? How does beauty save a child? Those are strong words. Does it? Well, God does. And if we define beauty by connecting that virtue with the Creator, then it can save a child, okay? And as long as we remember these two things are both included in beauty, then that opens how we can talk about it with our kids. John Piper said, "The beauty we see is a shadow of God's glory." So as I was pondering how to talk about this, I was thinking about the person who's ungrateful versus the person that has gratitude. Do you think the person that's ungrateful struggles to see beauty in the same way that the person who's grateful can? I think, and this is me, like I tried to see if I could find Bible verses, but in my mind, gratitude and the ability to see beauty are kind of in a symbiotic relationship. When I'm in a grumpy, growly mood and I am not being grateful, it's harder to see the beauty in my kids. It's harder to see the beauty in my home. It's harder to see beauty at all. But when I try to switch, take those thoughts captives, and develop more of an attitude of gratitude, it's easier to see beauty, and it's easier to make that connection between the beauty I see and my Creator. That's how beauty can cultivate wisdom and virtue in not only our own hearts, but in the hearts of our kids. Wisdom is the ability to see something for what it is. And virtue is that ability to be what you see. I'm going to say that again. Wisdom is your ability to see it. I can see this for what it is. And the virtue, those virtues that we're trying to establish in our kiddos' hearts and our own hearts, is becoming what we're seeing over here as a wise thing, right? And we hold those two together. And when those are merged, it's a beautiful thing. But we can only be wise, and we can only become those virtues through the power of Christ. It's only through his power. So we want our students to see beauty because that's where souls are held accountable. They're held accountable because God says they will be. So we've got to make a transition, or I have to make a transition, into training myself to see beauty. So how can we cultivate in our homes wisdom and virtue alongside education?
What about like affirmations and stuff? Making sure when you're doing your kids' hair or spending that extra time with them away from school, you make sure that they affirm that they are beautiful, that they are good, that they do good.
Yes. And where does that beauty come from? In their heart. They're image bearers. They're image bearers. Affirmation. Yes. I read a book one time, and I'm trying to remember what the name of it was, but it talked about affirming character qualities and not just what your child does. It was powerful because you want them built up in those natural character strengths of who God says they are. How else do we combine wisdom and virtue as we're thinking about education?
Kind of the expression, you are what you eat, you are what you study as well.
Yes.
I don't know how you.
I had that down. This book, I've been reading this book. It's by John Mark Comer. It's called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. It's a fabulous book. I have to read it slowly. I read it last fall and I picked it up again. It says, what you give your attention to is the person you become. Put another way, the mind is the portal to the soul, and what you fill your mind with will shape the trajectory of your character. In the end, your life is no more than the sum of what you gave your attention to. That bodes well for those apprentices of Jesus who give the bulk of their attention to him and to all that is good, beautiful, and true in his world. But not for those who give their attention to the 24/7 news cycle of outrage and anxiety and emotion-charged drama, or the nonstop feed of celebrity gossip, titillation, and cultural drivel. It's a powerful quote. So not only are we becoming what we give our attention to, same is true of our kids. So we have to be cognitive about what we're allowing them to put in their mind. We have to be cognitive of what we're setting our mind on. Is it wise of me when I'm exhausted to scroll social media for the next 30 minutes? That might not be the best use of my time. Is it a sin? No. No. But if I begin to think about what I'm giving my attention to, and that is the person I'm becoming, that changes a little bit where I want to focus, right? Okay, so I had down some thoughts. That was a thought I had, and I kind of jumped to it. We expose our students to beauty through literature, through creation, through life, but we don't impose it on them. We're careful about how we do this. God is careful with how he shapes us. He's the potter and the clay, which is a whole different set of imagery than laying us on the anvil and hitting us with a hammer. And there's times at the end of the day when I was schooling my children that I felt more hammer-like than I did shaping pottery. But if we want them to inculcate these ideas of good, true, and beautiful, it's probably more helpful to think of that potter and the clay. Beauty is a lens to bring focus to a soul. And when we focus a lens, that's a lot different than, golly, you've got to understand this literature. Rigor and demand won't get us there. So we have to inspire. We talk about inspiring our children to wonder, which feels like it's heady, as my title kind of did too, but I want to be practical. We can inspire our students by modeling how to be an explorer. How do we explore God's creation? How do we explore this story? Even if I don't really understand it myself, how are we going to learn about this together? How can this story point us to things that are virtuous and good? How can we apply this story to our heart and to our lives? Learn alongside with your child while exposing them to good, beautiful things. Whether that's classical music, whether that's art, they will become what they're spending their time with. Inspire by modeling, using your time wisely. At the writing of this book, which was several years ago, it said the average person spends 705 hours a year on social media. I think it's higher than that now. I did a quick Google search yesterday and it was over 900. They might spend, according to this book, 2,737 and a half hours on TV. If you transfer just 1 hour of TV before bed, you could read the entire Bible in 6 months. That convicted me. Paul said, we must look carefully then how we walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of our time because the days of evil. Making the best use of our time. Every day we have is a chance. Every hour we have is an opportunity, and every moment is a precious gift. By crafting this, we're modeling wisdom for our kids and the practical experience of how to manage your time well. We can also inspire by modeling gratitude daily in all of our opportunities. And I use that word opportunity intentionally. Sometimes that modeling is being honest. So, how many of you love Shakespeare? No. So what are we gonna do with that when our student needs to come home and has some Shakespeare they have to read? beauty. 10th grade, we're reading Shakespeare's Henry V. When I did it 2 years ago, we read it through twice because the first time was just to understand the language. Then we watched the movie, then we read it a second time so that it made more sense, okay? So let's be honest. Sometimes when those types of assignments come home, we can feel as parents overwhelmed, whether it's our own things we like, or whether it's our own insecurity and fear, like, I don't understand Shakespeare. How am I supposed to help my child with this? I don't understand Latin. Latin isn't spoken anymore. Why do we have to learn this? Okay? Those thoughts are valid. But if we voice those thoughts, then we are not pointing our children to beautiful things. So how can we be honest with where we truly are and still cultivate what we've been talking about? I think we can say, I didn't learn this, but I'm trying to develop an affinity for these types of things, right? Culture doesn't necessarily speak towards the wonder of Shakespeare, but we can learn about it. We can say, I didn't learn this in school, but let's learn this together. And if you come to Socratic dialogue, I'll teach you some questions that kind of help you do that. Okay? You don't have to be the expert to point your child to beauty. Okay? You don't have to be. When we say, I'm still learning, and I want to help you learn, we're modeling perseverance. We're modeling endurance. You're teaching your child that when we have something hard, we're not going to quit. And that's an important skill set. They will remember the fact that mom sat with me every day, even though she didn't 100% understand it. When my second born was wanting to go to the University of Illinois, he needed 4 years of a foreign language. And the only homeschool curriculum that had it was Bob Jones' Spanish, 1, 2, 3, 4. Every key teaching point was written in Spanish. Why was a homeschool material written in Spanish? I do not know. I spent hours trying to translate myself. I had 0 Spanish, I had Latin, but they kind of match. Your endings work the same. I spent hours sitting with him. And he said, Mom, that taught me we can do hard things. God will equip us with hard things. He will equip us in the way we need to walk. He said, it meant a lot to me that you were willing to spend time and to help me that way. So cultivate a relationship, but it also taught some of those virtues. Did I feel comfortable with it? Never. Never. Did I feel like I did an adequate job? Well, kind of. But could someone who've spoken Spanish done better? Probably. But did he still learn the tools he needed? Yes. Okay? And I share that because you're going to have subjects as your kiddos get older where you don't feel comfortable. You may not feel comfortable in the math they're in now, but you can still do it. Partner with your teacher. Be honest about it. Be honest with your student, but continue to point them to this, okay? As we learn alongside our children, God does a beautiful work in our own hearts. Sometimes teaching our kids and parenting our kids is part of God's refining of us. I would most often get upset with my kids when I saw traits in them that I didn't like in me. And I usually responded stronger because I wanted it out of their life, because I knew what it was to me. Okay? And that was God's work in my own heart. So see the beauty of what God is doing in you too. So, I want to get really practical now. We've got one thing, affirm your kids. What else can we do this year? And we've got about 7 minutes. So we're gonna brainstorm about 3 minutes, and then I have see beauty, to make beauty practical. So what can we do? What can we do at home to inspire?
Maybe step out of our comfort zone and show them something that we've not really seen or done, and have that experience with them.
Yes. There's a tension between wanting to do things well for the glory of God and allowing His grace to cover the striving we all feel we have to do. There's tension there. Like we all want to parent well. We all want our kids to make good choices. And God's grace has covered their sin once they become believers, just as He's done us. So be comfortable with the uncomfortable. Comfortable with that tension. Okay, what's something else practical we can do?
I think being self-effacing is so important, and going back to that learning with your child, along with your child.
Yes.
Let your child teach you things, and it's it's a gut reaction of most parents to, if your child comes and teaching you something, trying to tell you something, to accidentally up the ante with, let me now tell you more information you probably don't know, and instead of just falling back into it and letting that child do that teaching, because in essence they're mimicking us, which is the most wonderful affirmation that what we're doing is working.
Exactly. And maybe asking good questions so they can elaborate even more. Ask questions. Okay? Yes?
To build on that, if you're not hovering over your child, or not in the younger grades you may be, but if they're working independently and they come to you in the midst of you doing another task, if it's something you can put down, it's not an emergency, put it down. Let them go on squirrel runs, rabbit trails. If they are connecting between two different subjects in particular, or to a real life situation that you didn't bring up, encourage it, bring them out, reward them, give them a piece of pie afterwards, whatever. Because when they find the wonder, you don't want to throw a wet blanket on it.
Right.
Charting progress, I think, teaches virtue so well that you can look back and say, my goodness, we didn't know this before, and look where we're at now.
Yes.
And hard work does pay off in a variety of ways.
Not only charting the progress, but then speaking about it.
Absolutely.
So chart it, but also speak it. Give that blessing. Look what you've accomplished. Because they may be sitting in that negative space. Point them to what is true and good.
The passage you read up there talks about, nutshells everything on true, good, just.
Yes.
It gives you the summary that whatever is worthy of praise.
Yes.
And if you brag about your children in front of other adults, that does more than a lot of things you can do. Brag on them when they deserve it, because it's better than harping on them when they don't.
That kind of goes with that affirmation. So this, you had mentioned private affirmation, but also public affirmation. Particularly about those virtues. Whatever is worthy of praise, do it.
Allow them to hear you too.
Allow them to hear you, absolutely.
I never heard it.
I'm sorry.
Like, yeah, we all heard it, but just being able to hear it.
And what is it psychologists say? That for every criticism, it takes 7 that a girl's to overcome that? Like that's huge. Be affirming. See the good yourself and speak it. It's huge. It's huge. And I'm a task-driven person. I was guilty of not always doing that before we started our school day. I had that list, we're gonna check it off. Gotten better as I've gotten older, but that's huge. It's huge. There was an article Mrs. McDonald shared that had some practical, model a love of great things. Model for your student that you're picking up a good lit book. Maybe you turn on some classical music once in a while. I'm learning to like this too. Like, that's okay to say. Invest in your marriage. Love the way Christ loves. That's an easy thing to say, hard to do. Attend church. Eat dinner together every night. Investing in your kid, pointing them to God, is always going to pay dividends at some point. You're planting those seeds that will not, God will use them. It will not go void. Okay? So, in the couple minutes we have left, I would suggest I put pencils on the table. I put chocolate to fuel your thoughts. Try to think about what's one thing you want to try to do this year. This won't all come together in one fell swoop. It may be part of your journey through the whole education process. It may be part of God's refining in you. I sat at my table. I had a lot of piano lessons yesterday, and there's a couple of moms that came through that I had homeschooled with, and I said, I've thought about this topic for a long time, and they just started sharing, well, you know, we're insecure and we're fearful, and so we don't always feel comfortable with this, and I'm like, that's true. That's what we need to talk about. Because that's where we all are. And when a paper comes home or your child doesn't do what you thought they had or they expected, it's hard to see beauty in that. But if you step back, like Kelly said, and see that overarching progress over time, where you see those virtues come together, that's what they're going to remember. Kyle is my youngest, and He was a pretty reluctant learner. He likes to work with his hands. He's a mechanic at Macomb Airport now. And he came to me at Christmas last year. He gave me a lot of difficulty over Latin. And you guys may hear it too, because we do a lot of Latin here. And he said, Mom, I was wrong about Latin. And I said, why? And he said, when I'm diagnosing an engine, I have to look at the whole engine, and I have to look at the individual parts. And I have to go back and look at the whole, and I have to look at the individual. And he said, I'm the only student in my class that can do that. And he said, Latin is what did that for me. Because you have to look at the whole sentence, and you have to look at the endings, and the whole sentence and the endings. And he said, I was wrong. So it wasn't Latin that he was using, but it was the tools to translate Latin and those virtues. And I saw the virtue of humility, that he was willing to come back and say, I gave you a hard time about something, and it was still good, right? And that was a blessing. I shared that with a mom yesterday, and whose son is an auto mechanic, and she said, you know what? He does the same thing. I never thought about this. And he's frustrated at times with coworkers who can't. So keep your eyes open for those virtues and skills that are being developed just beyond the subject matter. Okay? It's important. I've taken the time. Thank you.
What was that book title? I'm sorry.
The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer.